Good morning and welcome to this crash course on driving impactful AI programs. The gap between what AI can do and the value we see in practice is growing. And most organizations now realize that the main challenge is not really the technology, but it's more how do you drive the change across the business. Over the past year, we have seen many organizations now move from strategy into execution, now setting up AI programs to actually start to deliver value from AI. But the question is, how do you do that in practice? When AI now almost touches everything in business, this can feel like a very much overwhelming task, like trying to eat a large elephant in just one bite. But this is practically the scenario for where many leaders now find themselves in today. So this crash course is not for AI native startups that can more or less now rebuild their source systems from scratch using vibe coding and other tools at their disposal. And it's not for fully AI first AI native companies where AI is already now running the day-to-day operations. But this is a crash course more for large complex organizations who have existing legacy real processes and also difficult constraints, who are in the end looking for a more practical way to drive their AI transformation. So if you are a business or technology leader that is a bit unsure where to get started and how to lead your AI transformation, this is a crash course that we have designed for you. And my name is Niklas Liedholm. I lead our AI business in Sweden, and I have co-created this crash course together with my colleagues here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tero Kallioinen, and I'm the principal consultant for creating value out of data and AI at Solita.
And good morning from my part also. My name is Mikko Väätäinen, and one of our leading consultants on the topic.
And before going deeper, just some housekeeping rules. There's an opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A tab, and of course we will share the recordings and the presentation after this webinar. So, we come from the consultancy firm Solita, and we are a consulting firm essentially helping the Northern European market to become AI and data-driven. And we currently have a bit more than 2,000 consultants, essentially helping our clients monetize data in AI. And for over 15 years, we have supported our clients in sort of their AI and data-driven transformations with hundreds of projects executed across AI transformation, AI solution development, and also AI readiness efforts. So now, moving into a bit more the content, please, Mikko, please set the scene.
Yeah, thank you.
For the crash course.
So, setting up AI programs is one really good way to give structure and help you focus and move forward quickly with the topic. But then how does the AI transformation look like? So, this is an oversimplification, so bear with me. But sometimes I believe that taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture and breaking the topic down into a easily graspable elements helps you to move forward and navigate the chaos. So successful digitalization has already built core or digitalized the core processes, built digital workflows, rule-based automations and so forth. And now with AI, we are entering this kind of agentic era where we are starting to look into amplifying the knowledge work. How do we then navigate in here? So there is growing amount of visionary thoughts and also discussions and progress towards the operating models. How does the operating model of a company transform with AI? There are no shortcuts to there. So first, as I mentioned, the foundations are built in via digitalization, and hopefully you are already in a good shape with that area. Then the big focus area at the companies at the moment, what we are seeing is on tooling, when instead of maybe the right framing should be on the upskilling of your employees and ensuring that they are able to turn those new business processes embedded with AI into life actually. Without the people, your capabilities won't materialize or bring you any competitive advantage truly. And only via that route you can start to actually transform your operative model. From technology perspective, this picture is a really good call to action. So what big corporations and also smaller companies, how we are able to utilize the capabilities today is far from what could be done with the technology. So this is the call to action in that sense, that how quickly we are able to close the gap and able to start truly utilizing the technical capabilities that are already out there. Future is already here, but it's not evenly distributed. But this picture is also unfair. So from the enterprise and corporate point of view, there is always legacy things, organizational things, your actual workforce and individual employees that set the pace on your transformation journey. So what is the corporate reality in your case, and how what is the gap that you are able to reach in what time frame? And for that, we hope to give you today some insights, some concrete take-home kind of items and knowledge. And with that, I will give the floor to Tero to take us further.
Thank you, Mikko. So I have both good news and bad news for you. The bad news is that the gap that Mikko highlighted is not easy to close, and you cannot do it simply by getting Copilot Studio licenses or other off-the-shelf tools for your employees. The good news is that we have worked with many of the leading organizations to solve this problem, and we have learned a way to do it, and we will share some of those key learnings with you today. It all starts by recognizing that you need a holistic solution to solve a holistic problem. That means that you need to integrate these 4 different perspectives into your approach. First, from the business perspective, you need to make sure that you identify business problems that are actually worth solving. So you can't do AI just for the sake of AI. You need to help business people to achieve their objectives, to fulfill their annual plans, to meet their scorecards. That's the only way to get their commitment into the time and effort and funding you will need from the business side. The second perspective is the human perspective. You need to co-design your AI solutions together with the customers and the end users to make sure that they feel they have been heard, they have engaged, and the solutions actually fit their workflows in practice. That's the only way to ensure that they are committed to adopting the solutions and avoiding the not invented here syndrome. Thirdly, the technology perspective. You can't just run after the latest AI hype. You should invest in technology that is fit for purpose, that helps you achieve your business objectives, and it is also scalable to your future business needs. And finally, the sustainability perspective. You need to make sure that your people are developing and using AI in a responsible manner to be compliant with the latest rules and regulations. And we have integrated these 4 perspectives into an AI transformation framework that we have developed when we have been working with some of our clients to help them manage their AI transformation initiatives successfully. So let's go through the framework on a high level, starting from the leadership layer. On the leadership layer, you need to choose the right approach for your maturity, and you need to define your level of ambition. So are you looking for just incremental optimization of your existing business processes, or are you actually looking to reinvent the business model? You also need to create a sense of urgency, for instance, showing what the competitors are doing and what's happening in the business environment. You need to provide a compelling AI vision that shows the business in business language why it is worth their while. And you need to estimate the high-level value potential to justify the investments. You need to make clear choices about where to invest, because you can't solve everything at once. And you need to back those choices up with enough funding and accountability within the organization. And that usually means starting a joint AI program between business and IT. So, moving to the green layer, then the use case layer. There we have found that it's a good practice to map your value streams, your business processes, and your customer journeys so that you can pinpoint the super moments where you can create disproportionate value with AI. And Mikko will talk a bit more about finding that value shortly. Once you've identified the opportunities, you of course need a pipeline to actually deliver those opportunities. You need an AI development engine, and by that we mean a team and a structure that will turn your promising ideas into scalable solutions and measurable value. And this can only be done with co-design and seamless collaboration between business and IT. So now at last it's time to throw away and kiss goodbye the old model of order delivery relationship between business and IT, if you haven't done that already. But we have also seen that as organizations become more mature in AI, the demand for AI solutions on the business side increases, and a centralized AI development function starts to become a bottleneck. And this change is significantly accelerated by the advent of low-code AI solutions like Copilot Studio, for instance. And we start to see phenomena like shadow AI emerging in business functions. And the way to tackle this is to give the lead for the AI development to the business functions so that they can actually steer the AI development, and this enables stronger ownership, scalable value creation, and turns IT from a bottleneck into a trusted partner and accelerator for the business functions. Moving on to the blue layer, the way of working layer, it starts on the left-hand side on the individual level. There you need to provide your employees with the right tools and skills for AI productivity in their everyday work life, so that they can turn that into a healthy habit. But we have also seen that learning in e-learning courses and classroom trainings is not sticky. You need to create retention for the use of AI solution, and that's the part that often fails. And the way to achieve this is actually to create communities within the business functions where people who are working on the same context, on the same topics, actually share their best practices and advice with each other. And by creating AI assistants that are specifically customized and tailored for the needs and the workflows of that business function. But we've also seen that the real productivity increase from AI does not happen on the individual level. It actually happens on the team level when you create AI-powered multidisciplinary teams that use AI acceleration to iterate much faster, make decisions much faster, and dramatically increase the time to value, the value delivery. And finally, to manage all of this, you also need AI security and governance. You need to establish guardrails for the acceptable use of AI within your organization. And you need to make sure that people have the right kind of tools for developing AI solutions. This also means that you need to establish access controls and boundaries for AI development. You cannot let everybody do whatever they like with AI, and you cannot let AI agents run free in your organizations. It's a good idea in general to create sandboxes where the early adopters can play and experiment quite freely, but then set boundaries when they try to change business data, when they want to connect to external systems, or when they want to share a solution with multiple users, for instance. And finally, to power all of this, you need a layer of AI-ready data and technology. And here you can start by creating trustworthy, easy-to-use and reusable data products that are owned and shared by the business functions to make sure that your AI solutions are not built on isolated data pipelines, but they actually share the same common data assets. But it's not enough to provide AI with data. AI agents can only work with your data if they actually have the context. And that means that you need to start building a semantic layer that helps the AI agents understand the data, and you need to provide an MCP, Model Context Protocol Garden, which is a collection of MCP interfaces that the AI agents can use to access your business systems. And finally, you need to build a secure and scalable AI agent platform, because you will have many AI agents within your organization. Every department, every function will need their own AI assistant, and you can't build those as individual solutions. So you need to make sure that those are built on a shared platform that uses the right level of isolation depending on the use case. Sometimes you might need locally hosted models, sometimes you might need to host it on-premise, sometimes it's a sovereign LLM, sometimes you can work with the public cloud. But that's an overview of the AI transformation framework, and now we will deep dive into a few specific topics. So Niklas first will tell us a bit about how to choose the right approach for AI transformation. Then Mikko will dive into the AI value creation and finding those valuable opportunities. I will tell you a bit more about the value delivery pipeline, and then Niklas will go into Colab.ai, which is the Solita model for AI accelerated teamwork. And finally, Niklas will also cover a bit of the topic of AI-ready data assets. So let's dive into it, and over to you, Niklas, for choosing the right approach.
Thank you, Tero. All right. There's no single recipe for AI transformation, and when setting the right approach, you must of course consider your existing maturity level and the constraints that you have in your business at this moment. Now, when we meet clients, most clients fall into 3 common scenarios that are helpful in understanding when determining the right approach. Now, in the first scenario, we meet organizations that typically have high AI ambition, but the value of AI remains unproven, and there's no clear mandate in place to actually drive the AI transformation. And in this situation, there is typically an immediate need to actually prove value fast, also often with quite constrained resources. And this is typically where a use case led approach makes sense. You start with 1 or a few well-chosen use cases that can be executed quickly to prove value. So this is essentially a more bottom-up approach where use cases are either identified through operational insights or through running a quick use case discovery exercise. If done properly, I think this is an approach that is typically a very good starting point. And I think we have also, this is a very common approach, of course, and we have seen this approach work well in many different industries and companies. So just to provide an example, we had a tech client that was struggling to execute a growth strategy because they lacked predictive insights. And we then helped them prove the value of building a predictive customer lifetime value model to forecast unit economics and to guide their marketing investments. And once the results then were clear, they could then sort of scale up the funding into this approach and sort of ensure that all the leaders bought into changing the way of working. And this ultimately changed how they were doing marketing investments, where essentially AI and data got embedded into the most critical decision processes that regarded growth investments, like deciding on how to distribute the marketing budget across markets and channel, as an example. So I think this is a quite sort of good story on how this has been a successful approach leading to transformation in the end. But I think it's when you think of your approach, it's always important to also think of the trade-offs for each approach. And in this case, I think it's important to emphasize that if you, for example, approach the wrong use case, or especially you don't really manage to get the commitment from the business, there's a high risk that you end up doing isolated proof of concepts that in the end doesn't turn into transformation or value. And I think this is also a quite typical scenario as well, which is often referred to as falling into the proof of concept trap. So definitely something to be aware of when choosing this approach. Now, in the second scenario, we meet clients where business capacity exists, but authority and funding are fragmented across functions. And in this situation, this is where a function-led approach makes sense. You essentially work with the business function or the functional leaders within the functional processes to help identify and prioritize the most promising AI use cases and start to push those towards value. And I think it's important to emphasize here that this is a very effective way to ensure a business-driven transformation from the start and start to build maturity into the different functions in the company while driving value and impact. But it of course also runs into limitations if the value that you're after depends on cross-functional coordination and collaboration. So going a bit deeper into this, when you choose this approach, as I said, your goal should be to work with the functional leaders within the processes to identify the most pressing bottlenecks and pain points. So as an example, if you're focusing on sales, you might go deeper into the lead generation processes. And if you're focusing on finance, you might go into quote to cash. And I think now the main difference is that you're moving from being use case first to workflow first. And I think it is then important to emphasize that, of course, all problems that you will identify will not only depend or include AI as being the best sort of solution. So really understanding what's really the problem and find ways to improve those processes, and then of course have other solution hypotheses as well, I think is very important when sort of taking this approach. You should always aim to solve things as simply as possible. So let's consider a case example at a large industrial organization that structured its AI transformation around the function-led model. And in this case, the value of AI was already proven because they had already executed a few use cases and sort of demonstrated value. And we had also helped them build an AI strategy, which also included defining the value potential on the functional level. So the challenge here was not really or that's a bit of a simplification, but the biggest challenge in the end was not to get the mandate, but more the siloed organizational structure, and that AI maturity varied a lot between the different functional units. But with secured top management support, the organization then used a functional approach to build AI maturity within the functional units and to start to sort of push initiatives into value. And this approach essentially involved helping each function work from their strategic priorities into value hypotheses, defining the use cases that were then validated and pushed to become embedded into their core workflows. So I think this is a quite solid approach to take, and especially to ensure a more business-driven transformation. And I think it's also important to emphasize here that one of the results here is, of course, that you then get these initiatives, they become function-owned, and the business is then committed to progress this forward and to also fund these initiatives. But there's always also limitations to this approach. I think in this case, we already started to see some redundancy in the type of use cases that were identified and executed upon on the different functional units, and also that some of the improvements were more sort of sub-optimizing, doing improvements in a larger process as a whole. And I think that leads us to the next scenario. And in this scenario, we find clients where the fragmented cross-functional processes are more the main constraints. And of course, AI alone, being just a tool, will in the end not really fix that. But this is where a value flow led approach makes sense. This typically involves at least a broader operating model shift, and then AI would then, of course, be only one of several themes for driving improvements in these value flows. And of course, in simple organizations, this can be a relatively lightweight shift, but as we are now focusing on more complex, large organization, this of course become a big transformation in itself, and you wouldn't typically brand this as an AI program, but rather an operating model shift to now start to ensure the benefits of AI. So the trade-off here is that in this approach, we focus on end-to-end outcomes and customer value, but at then the cost of speed and simplicity. This is, of course, a bit more complicated change to drive in the end. So I think while this, of course, can have a lot of impact, this can be a riskier starting point if you need to be able to report back value quickly to secure funding for your AI program. So if you are on that level, you probably want to go for the functional approach first. So then, again, let's take a practical example here, where we're working for a large global industrial organization who are now completely redesigning their operating model around value flows, where then AI is one of many themes for driving their improvements. So in this approach, they are essentially working from what drives customer value into understanding the value streams. They do process and systems mapping, look into how they can standardize these processes, and then look into AI enablement and sort of get started with execution. And this is, of course, a massive program, but I think the result from an AI perspective here is, of course, that you get your AI opportunities well aligned to these end-to-end value flows, with also clear accountability for adoption and value realization. Okay, so that's the three approaches, and I think the key point here is to remember is that you should choose the right approach based on your existing maturity level and the current constraints that you have in your organization. So if you need to prove value fast, you typically go for the use case-led approach, and if you need to build maturity in the business functions and ensure a business-driven transformation, you typically go for the function-led. And if value depends on your ability to drive end-to-end outcomes, then you typically go for the value flow-led approach. And I think the most important part here is also to focus on that you should always aim to ensure a business-driven and owned transformation, because that's really a key success factor here. And this is what Mikko will go a bit deeper into in the next topic.
Yes. Thank you, Niklas and Tero. It's quite nice to continue from the setting the scene and the overviews from here. So let's take a quick look into the value side of things. First, as a question, so what is the euro potential of your AI portfolio at the moment? Are you able to answer to this kind of question? What is the planned time frame to realize this value potential? Is this already in a defined way in the plans with the leadership team or with the business areas? I think this is a question that surfaces many insights on your own maturity at the moment related to AI. But take this as a question and consider it that how well are you able to answer it today, and thus how credible your approach at the moment is from the leadership perspective. Then what is value? What value are we talking about? It's quite a vague term, and it's been used quite loosely in many discussions. So we use this kind of simplification of framing this into three value buckets: productivity, cost savings, and new revenue. What we are at the moment seeing in many companies is that the cost saving part is maybe the primary objective in many cases, via the productivity gains from AI. And that's also part of maybe the hype that the AI hype is building, that there will be a huge productivity leaps and thus cost savings in the operations. Maybe some like root causes for this can come from many AI initiatives and even AI programs being set up under the CFO office. Not saying anything bad about the CFO office, but just like the nature of that kind of setup might easily lead to focusing on the cost saving side of things. When we are discussing about whether AI is hype or not and where does it actually materialize the value potential, then the new revenue should be in the eyes of the leaders and the people driving those AI transformation programs. Unfortunately, quite often this is not the case, but that this is our guidance, that keep these three buckets in your mind and focus each of them. Of course, another view comes from the expected value side of things. So when it's clear that what value you are actually seeking, then you can start to also consider that what is the expected value. And that comes from where you are in your own maturity in the transformation journey. Are you focusing on upskilling people, or is it more on the like actually transforming the business operations or business processes? And when are you actually starting to address the operating model itself? So this quite often defines the expected value depending where you are. So the definition evolves as your maturity evolves. Few concrete examples how this has happened in practice. So in the early 23, we worked with the global stainless steel manufacturer Outokumpu and helped them to set up the AI function to the company. And it was the really early phases of Gen AI and when this hype started. So in that initiative, the very first phase was by decision focusing on showcases. So the expected value was to just show and prove that we can do this. We are on top of things. We can start to actually use this new technology for us in a way that it makes sense for us. And then it started to evolve from there. But I think that was a good example as a like good first step might be on showcases, that is the expected value the company want to see. The second one is then on the portfolio potential level, where I started this section of value. So what is the total euro potential of the AI portfolio? So this is another example close to what Niklas was also framing in his right approach selection, that we've been working with this one manufacturing company and helping them to build this kind of credible value portfolio of hundreds of millions in value potential, and then now created a working funnels to actually start to realize that potential, and the active funnel is now worth of like tens of millions. And Tero will a bit like tell us more about the structures, how to set up such. Moving even further, the controller proven value is then something that we've been helping this one global process industry company to actually build a entirely new development model and do it in a way that the value is controller proven. The numbers make sense. All right. I thought that I can like briefly show the elements of such, not going into the actual practicalities because it's not plug and play, it's always company context. But some the elements are here, and as you are like looking at these elements, you can already start to see that sounds quite familiar, and that's the case. And the main thing in here is that how do you connect the dots? And for connecting those dots, I will share a few observations from the discussions that we are having with different companies. So first, all companies, all business unit leadership teams know their targets. That exists always. But for some mysterious reasons, when you go in the same company to a individual development project or development initiative, the story might not be the same. What has happened? Why has that clear target been lost in the translations, in the handovers and so forth? So just securing this part, it's trivial to say this, but it's hard work to do in practice. But just highlighting this old truth that ensure that the development teams are actually connected to the targets that the leadership teams have set. Whether it's on annual plans and being more incremental, or whether it's been on a strategic timeline and then more strategic in nature. Another observation is that the discussions whenever there is a new solution being envisioned, that what do we already have for this vision? Where do we start? What can we utilize from the existing, and what is missing that needs to be built? And then should we make or buy it ourselves? Or make it ourselves or buy it outside? So connecting the dots with whether it's an AI function or capability team or whatever the chosen approach in your company is, this is also, sounds trivial, but happens rarely. Truly assessing what do we have, what do we need to make this vision reality, and then start to act on it. And the third element is then on the outcome roadmaps. So the technical teams and the development experts on that level, they know how to build release roadmaps. They know the technology. That's not the issue. What is being put into the production and what kind of new behavior is unlocked is rarely discussed and defined as a target. So 2 simple questions in setting the targets and also steering the progress that are now defined in the screen. So once we have the first version of the solution in live, are we truly seeing the behavior that we assume that it will trigger? Yes or no? Simple question and simple answer. Is that behavior that we intended actually happening? If yes, then you can move on to the second question. When that behavior is actually happening, do we see the value being realized that we intended? Yes or no? Simple. If no, back to the drawing board. If yes, you are on a solid track when you've been able to connect also the dots from the beginning. This is the recipe for actually being able to measure and show in controlled, proven way the value out of your initiatives. What is truly the impact? With that, I will leave you with the one final question related to value. What if you set up your AI program as a profit unit? That is a powerful question that might surface many insights in your organization and how you've been set up your initiatives at the moment. I will not go into the further details or our observations on the topic, but I just want to leave this question to you and take a moment after the session and consider this truly, and then see what surfaces from there. It might be quite insightful. But let's next look about the pipeline. Sure. Tero, go ahead.
Thank you, Mikko. So now when Mikko has whet your appetite on finding value, let's look at how to actually deliver that value with an efficient pipeline. And we have helped many companies set this up. Mikko already pointed to the example of Outokumpu, a steel manufacturer, but we have also worked with a logistics equipment manufacturing company, an industrial goods company, and a global OEM manufacturer, for instance, on this value pipeline. And the overall structure always ends up looking pretty similar on the high level. So you start by identifying the promising AI opportunities across the different business functions. Then you refine those opportunities into AI solution concepts, and you estimate their value and their feasibility to justify moving forward in the pipeline or in the funnel. And that's why we drew it as kind of an arrow that's getting more narrow, because you are dropping out the lower quality opportunities all the way through the process, and only the best ones make it further. Then you move into the proof stage, where you prove the technical feasibility of the solution with a POC, and you also try to get some evidence of the business value creation already, so that you can then commit to building the first production version of the solution, which is typically a pilot. And finally, you scale the production version by extending the feature set and by maintaining the solution and setting up monitoring the solution as needed. We've also seen that the typical problems or bottlenecks that organizations experience on this value pipeline look pretty similar from one company to another. Here are some of the most typical ones. So starting from the left-hand side in the identify phase, for instance, we often see that there are too few good AI ideas coming from the business to feed the pipeline. And this might be, for instance, because the maturity of AI is not that high in the business functions, so they cannot detect how AI might help them yet, or there isn't just enough pressure from the business management to actually start creating value with AI. We also see that AI opportunities are often ideated in silos, or even by individuals, not across business functions, so you lose the possibility to find these value stream opportunities that Niklas talked about that can be really transformative. We also see that it often happens so that when employees become AI curious, everything starts to look like an AI problem to them. And they start requesting AI solutions to problems that could even be solved with RPA or even traditional BI reporting. In the refine phase, we see often that costs and risks are not adequately considered in that stage, or that the value potential is not estimated. And this might then lead to that you invest in solutions that are not actually possible to implement and not acceptable in the end, or that business isn't committed to implementing those solutions because you haven't justified the value potential. In the proof phase, our clients often run into problems with data availability, quality, and connectivity. And they also often see scope creep and timeline slippage when the concept has not been well enough defined or the process isn't well enough managed. The build phase is often where we see a handover or transition from ownership by a centralized AI team or the IT organization to ownership by business. And this is a clear breaking point. This is often where it turns out that business isn't really committed to invest in building in production those ideas that they were initially quite curious about when they still didn't have to pay for it. And finally, in the scaling phase, we, for instance, see that even if a solution is built into production, then the end users are not necessarily willing to adopt it widely into use because the solution actually didn't fit their workflows, because it wasn't co-designed with the end users, because they feel like they were not engaged in the process and the solution was not invented here. We also see that the solution is not monitored or maintained properly, which might lead to not retraining the solutions. With AI solutions, you always need to consider whether they need to be retrained occasionally or not, and then that easily tends to get forgotten. And finally, the actual value creation of the solution is not often measured in production. As Mikko said, that the target should be delivering controller-proven value. That's often missing. And then we don't also get this feedback pipeline or feedback process from the production stage back to earlier stages in the pipeline so that we could actually learn from what we built before into our new use cases. Fortunately, we've also found a lot of structural solutions to these problems. And here are just a few examples that we've helped our clients design and implement. So for instance, you can do facilitated AI opportunity mapping and refinement together with the business unit. You can focus strongly on business value right from the start and connect your AI initiatives to the business priorities, the annual plans, the must-win battles, the personal scorecards, whatever the business people actually use to steer their actions. You can have an open mindset and a wide toolbox to choose the right tool for the right job. So not thinking that everything is a Gen AI problem, but choosing traditional machine learning, intelligent process automation, low-code solutions like Copilot Studio, or even external partner solutions as needed. So making those make or buy decisions as well that Mikko mentioned. You also need to gradually reduce uncertainty along the pipeline. So you need to tolerate quite a lot of uncertainty in the beginning, and you need to establish minimum viable governance in each stage so that you do not kill the ideas and you do not diminish the volume of new ideas with too much governance in the beginning. You can create fusion teams to focus on AI opportunities and functions, and you can assign AI designers who can work with AI accelerated workflows as catalysts to the AI transformation. You should establish a transparent AI portfolio that has clear status and responsibilities for each opportunity so that you can see and track how they are actually progressing through the pipeline, and you can see who's accountable for each of the opportunities. You should have clear deliverables and decision points along the way. And you should have a clear agreement between business and IT for who's funding which stage of the pipeline. Of course, you need strong agile development practices. And if you are able to increase the AI literacy of your organization, that will help you feed more ideas into the beginning of the funnel. And finally, you should build reusable templates for your solutions, for your data products, for your MCPs, and for the semantic layer, which Niklas will mention briefly later, to make sure that you're not building your AI solutions as one-off, but you're actually building them on a scalable platform. I'd just like to highlight two of these solutions in a bit more detail. Let's look at the fusion teams and the role of the AI designers. So a fusion team is a multidisciplinary team, also sometimes called a pod, that focuses on solving a particular problem or building a particular solution. And that team is supposed to have the end-to-end skills to build the whole thing by themselves. In an ideal scenario, they have full-time allocation, so they operate with high autonomy. They have their own backlog, their own agile way of working, and they are quite free from the organizational bureaucracy and reporting requirements to all kinds of steering groups and whatnots. And Gartner has made this term famous a few years ago when they reported that a fusion team on average can be 2.5 times faster in digital solution development than a traditional centralized model. And that what we are seeing is that more mature organizations are using these kind of fusion teams for their flagship AI initiatives. So if they really want to push an AI initiative that has strategic significance, they can dedicate a full-time fusion team to work on that. And what we see here now is an example of what that kind of fusion team could look like. So you have a solution owner who's sitting in the business function, and they are responsible for the business problem. They are responsible for driving the adoption of the solution when it's eventually built. Then you have the data scientist, who's the wizard who actually builds the models and the algorithms. And then you have the data or ML engineer who builds the data pipelines and sets up the AI infrastructure for the solution. You usually also need a domain specialist who knows the business context, the business workflows, the business data, the meaning of the terms, and so on. And that's often an actual end user of the solution. So they're actually included in this core team. And you might have an agile coach, for instance, to ensure that the team is working smoothly and iterating quickly. But then typically you also need an AI designer who's actually the person responsible for designing a solution concept that is both valuable and feasible. And we see that less mature organizations also emulate this model by setting up what we call virtual fusion teams. So they have these kind of structures, but people are not actually allocated full time. So they have lots of other responsibilities, and then you lose a lot of the benefits of this model. They might also be not just focusing on one flagship AI solution, but they might be focusing on a business area, a business function, for instance. And that's fine, it's a good way to get started, but it won't accelerate you as quickly as having dedicated Fusion teams for your flagship initiatives. And finally, let's look at briefly at the role of an AI designer, because we have seen that this can be a real catalyst to your AI transformation, especially in the earlier stages of maturity. So in that stage, it's often the situation that business people don't quite understand AI well enough to see how it could help them solve their problems. And there's also no true agile product ownership capability within the business functions yet. So what the AI designers can then do, they can engage with the business people to identify problems that AI can help solve that are actually valuable. They can connect the AI development initiatives for business objectives, roadmaps, annual plans, must-win battles, scorecards, whatever. They can co-design those solutions together with the end users and the business stakeholders to ensure that the concepts are actually desirable, viable, feasible, and responsible. They can steer the development of AI POCs and pilots toward value delivery and make sure that we stay on scope and stay on the agreed time box. And while they're doing that, they can also introduce new AI-accelerated workflows for design and prototyping of digital solutions, thereby increasing the AI maturity of the organization. But this is not an easy role to play, and it's not easy to find these kind of people because you need quite a versatile competence set. These people need to be good at business case modeling so that they can find and justify the value. They need to be good at user-centric design and human insight so that they can engage with the business users and understand what helps them in their context. They need to understand the possibilities and limitations of AI so that they can design solution concepts that are realistic and feasible. And they need to be good with AI tools and AI-accelerated workflows in order to apply those into the design process. And finally, they actually need to be quite capable in navigating organizational politics as well, because they tend to be the bridge builders between business and IT. And as the organizational maturity increases, the role of the AI designers tends to become smaller because the business can take more and more responsibility for this role. But in earlier maturity, we're seeing that this can really be a catalyst for your AI transformation. And now let's move from that into actual AI accelerated teamwork. So over to you, Niklas.
Thanks, Tero. All right, quite exciting topic as well. So I think it's very clear to everyone now that we as individuals now have access to a lot of more productivity tools, as you mentioned, on an individual basis. But we think the real productivity leap will happen at the team level, where then AI-powered cross-disciplinary teams can drive dramatically faster value delivery. And I think this is an area we expect to evolve a lot in the next, perhaps not even years, the decades. I mean, this is a very new sort of thing evolving with new approaches emerging and also, of course, new tools being released, which might be more or less suitable for different scenarios. Now, one example then of such an approach is what we have developed at Solita together with ISS, the facility management company, is an approach called Colab.ai. Just to be clear, I mean, this is just one example, but I think this has been proven to be very powerful in these situations where it has been built for. So this is our version of AI-accelerated teamwork. It's inspired by the Mob.ai model, which has been developed by Tesla. And it has been then proven and refined with other clients as well, like DNA. So what problem does this approach tries to solve? So in software development, we also see clearly that we can speed up coding tasks through new tools like Copilots and Claude and Lovable and these type of things. But the insight here that we see is that the development will still stay slow if the queues and the feedback loops aren't fixed. So the point here is that it might now be easy to, or sort of quick to churn out a lot of new prototypes, But if you don't really get feedback from the teams, the users, the customers, you are not really increasing the amount of validated concepts. You're just churning out new solutions. And that means that you're just accelerating isolated steps in this process rather than sort of this full end-to-end development flow. So the way for which the Colab.ai approach tries to solve this is to have all brilliant minds working on the same thing at the same time, in the same place, at the same computer, accelerated with AI. So we essentially form a team with 5 to 7 people that possesses then needed business and tech expertise. And nobody's really looking at their individual stuff. Everyone is sitting behind the same computer, working on the same problem all at once, accelerated with AI tools. And we have produced a lot of content on this approach if you're curious about going deeper into it. But I think what's relevant here is to see the benefits. And as I said, it's quite not a surprise that we see, of course, clear benefits in how fast we can iterate. So instead of being able to produce maybe one new user interface in an hour, we might be able to produce 40 alternative versions. And that becomes very powerful if we connect this to how we can then also accelerate decisions on how this product is being sort of developing. Because in this approach now, we have all the business and tech expertise in the same room, so we can essentially take a decision on the development every 5 minutes if we need to build a useful product much faster. A third benefit that we also see is that because everyone stays engaged and are in the same room, part of this development, we also see a large reduction in the needed coordination meetings because everyone is participating in the development, so there's nothing really to align or coordinate on. So, as I said, this is more to be seen as one very successful approach in this type of context, but I think it's really exciting to see what other types of approaches will over time. And at Solita, for example, we of course look into how this will affect our delivery models, etc. So I think the key point here from an AI program perspective is to, of course, ensure that you're experimenting and learning sort of how this can be integrated in your organization. Like we do with our group management team, we are also playing around on how this approach might be useful for.
If I may, I really like that we included this picture in the presentation because everything is simple in slides. but in reality, it's super messy. Lots of mistakes, arguments, there are dialogues, coming into conclusions, figuring out what actually works. And I think it's quite cool that we included also the real example from our leadership team internally, also trying to figure this out. So that's nice.
Yeah, this is it's important to experiment.
Yes.
All right, so let's move to the next topic, which is to build the foundations of AI-ready data. And I think it's important to emphasize here that over the past decades, we have moved from physical records into mainframes, then relational databases, and now into today's era of data, big data, dashboards, and self-service BI. And what we now see emerging is a shift in how users actually start to interact with data through what is now referred to as conversational analytics and data agents. So now instead of using reports and dashboards, people can now start to ask questions directly on top of our data platforms and BI tools, where then the agents are able to find, interpret, and to summarize what this data actually says related to the questions. And while this is still very early, there are a lot of other emerging trends, and we can already see clear progress now on, for instance, autonomous agents and also decision intelligence capabilities, among other trends. And just to take a bit compressed, simplified example, we are here looking at an example where we ask AI to analyze IKEA's product offerings and compare those to ours. So in this case, we can see that the AI agent is able to interpret the question and then to divide the task into 2 subtasks. One being to scrape the IKEA's website to get the product information, but then also to ensure we are fetching our product information from the right data mart. And based on that, it can then sort of make the comparison, and it can also provide some insights. And of course, this is a very simplified and compressed example. But the key point here is, I think the technology is already a lot more capable than this. And the key point is that it will become a lot more capable going forward. And this, of course, creates a lot of new opportunities, but it also creates risks and exposes us gaps in our existing data capabilities. And that is what I think is now the main focus from an AI program perspective. So the question is, how should you then evolve your data readiness for the AI era? Quite a big topic, of course. But I think there are 3 things that you should now consider in your AI program. The first is you should ensure that capability development gets prioritized by business use cases. And the goal here is, of course, to close the gaps that blocks the most immediate value. And well, this is a quite common thing to say, and it's quite a simple thing to say in theory, but I think in practice, we see many clients, of course, struggling with this, especially at lower levels of maturity, because in the end, you might not have a clear view of where your biggest AI opportunities are, and the real knowledge around new tech capabilities, the data platforms, what data you have, how that can be connected, and the data quality, that type of information, the real knowledge about that typically tends to sit in the heads of a few key people. And those few key people tend also to be quite busy as well. And this makes prioritization very difficult because no one is really seeing the full picture here. But I think this is also where AI, talking about accelerated teamwork and these topics could be quite useful. And I think that companies that have invested more into mapping out their opportunities, do process mapping, mapping out the systems, etc., can very likely benefit from having AI to support in identifying and facilitate the discussion for identifying where the biggest bottlenecks and gaps are. Now, secondly, you must make your data products usable at scale. And I will not go deep into the data product topic as such, but the point here is just that we must now both ensure and manage that structured and unstructured data, like documents, are treated as governed assets with clear ownership. And as you mentioned, Tero, that we also ensure that these data products can be consumed by different AI tools using what is now started to be referred to as a semantic layer. So I'm not going to go deep into the semantic layer, but this is what sits in the middle of the data and AI application layer. And that is clearly something that is now becoming a lot more important. And we now start to see all the platforms and vendors start to invest in establishing capabilities for this. And we also have now more clients also starting to build these capabilities internally. So this is evolving to become a lot more important. And if you're interested in getting more information and knowledge on that, I recommend participating in our next crash course. Quite interesting area. Then thirdly, it's also very critical from a program management standpoint to ensure that we govern how AI accesses data, produces outputs, and takes action. Because as an example, AI will now start to access data, sometimes on behalf of us as people, and sometimes on behalf of us autonomous systems. And of course, now the access rights must be able to reflect that shift. And then finally, it is important to also design for security, privacy, and compliance, and to, of course, establish accountability for AI outputs, decisions, and failure modes. So I think, in essence here, making it important to start to collect these type of feedback loops as well. So in summary, prioritize capability development by business use cases, make data products usable at scale, and govern how AI accesses data, produces outputs, and take action. Simple.
Yeah. Just do it.
Yeah. What are you waiting for? Yeah.
And with that said, let's look into what are the next steps.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you. So we wanted to conclude this crash course with a few bits of practical advice for you. So what you need to do next depends, of course, where you are on your AI transformation. Nobody is starting this from scratch. Everybody's done something already. So the focus area will depend and vary from one organization to another. And we wanted to provide a bit of advice on each of those areas. So firstly, on the leadership layer, you need to ensure that you have a comprehensive AI strategy that covers all the key questions and is not missing any of the key pieces. And a good checklist, for instance, is this framework that we showed earlier. Do you have an AI strategy which explains what you intend to achieve in each of those areas? You can also conduct an AI masterclass among the business leadership if you feel that it's necessary to bring them on the same level, or at least to ensure that all of them have a basic understanding of what AI means for your business, so that they can set realistic targets and direct the development. And you can create a practical proposal for an AI program where you need to argue the sense of urgency, why you need to act now, and the size of the prize. So what is the potential value? What are the potential gains if you will succeed in this? Then looking at finding the opportunities, a good way to start, for instance, is to engage these AI designers that I mentioned with business units so that they can conduct AI opportunity mapping to discover those valuable AI use cases that solve real business problems. And there they can also apply the AI accelerated design methods to move really quickly from idea to prototype. With the Colab.ai method that Niklas mentioned, we are seeing this actually happen within 1 day, getting from idea to prototype. And that's quite amazing AI acceleration in the design phase. And as Mikko spoke a lot about the importance of focusing on value. You need to estimate the value potential already early. So that's a process that you can set up. That's a practice you can set up, starting to require value potential estimations at the very early part of the pipeline. Then on the pipeline level, you can start by establishing this kind of fusion team that I explained to run your AI POCs and pilots, either for a business function, or if you really invest on a specific opportunity, then for that. And you need to manage a balanced opportunity portfolio covering the different buckets that Mikko spoke about, for instance, so ensuring that you're not just focusing on cost savings and productivity, but also on creating new revenue. And you can establish an efficient value pipeline by implementing some of those structured solutions that I mentioned earlier to make sure that you're steering the funnel effectively towards business value. Then if you are already in a stage where you need to start empowering the business functions to do their own AI development, if you start seeing shadow AI emerging already, then one good action there is to create an AI builder's toolbox that you can provide to the early adopters with the right tools, the right guidelines, with the training and support, but also with the access controls and the secure boundaries so that they can start building and developing by themselves. On the blue layer, on the AI literacy topic, you can, for instance, conduct an AI maturity assessment to pinpoint the biggest training needs in your organization, as well as assess the attitudes towards AI. Are you people excited about AI, or are they concerned that it will take their jobs? And how do you translate that concern into excitement? You can also run an AI academy in a format where people can actually bring their own use cases there. So they're not just learning things in theory, but they are applying them into practice on real-life use cases on the fly. And that's much more efficient way to achieve persistent learning than just doing e-learning courses on online applications. And that probably also means that you need to launch AI productivity tools for your employees. Probably not just generic tools like Copilot, but actually custom-built in-house assistants that are tailored to specific workflows or specific business functions so that they really understand that context and create value in that context. In AI-accelerated teamwork, you can start by creating a shared business context for AI teamwork, so making sure that you have, for instance, projects where people working together can set the company context, set the problem context, and share their AI-generated artifacts and prototypes easily with each other, so that there's an environment that enables this kind of AI-accelerated teamwork. And then you can start running sprints, for instance, with the Colab.ai method, or other methods are also available for trying, experimenting, and figuring out what is the way that works best in your organization. In the governance area, you need to assign an AI governance lead. AI governance is not a separate process, it's not a separate function, it's not something that happens separately from the rest of the business. It's something that needs to be integrated into the existing development processes, but you do need somebody to coordinate that, and that's what an AI governance lead is for. And then you need to establish this minimum viable governance model that I mentioned. So tolerating uncertainty in the beginning of the pipeline and gradually removing uncertainty, increasing governance when you move forward on the pipeline. And you can also start extending your data catalog, which you probably already have, into an AI catalog, because in order to manage the AI solutions and achieve compliance requirements, you really need to start tracking what AI solutions you are running in your organization. And finally, moving to the bottom layer of AI-ready data and technology, one good place to start is to build the first easy-to-use, trustworthy, and reusable data products so that your different AI solutions are built on the same shared data assets and not on separate data pipelines for every AI solution. You can also design what the semantic layer means for you, what the MCP garden means for you, and start building them incrementally for the first use cases, but so that you can also support horizontal scaling in the future. The way you do it is also applicable for future use cases. And finally, you can build a secure and scalable in-house AI assistant platform, because you will have many AI assistants, many AI agents in the company. There will be AI agents for different business functions, there will be AI agents for different roles, there will be AI agents for different workflows. And you can't build those as isolated solutions. You need a shared platform to build those on, and you need to be able to choose the right kind of level of isolation, as I mentioned earlier as well. And those agents need to be able to connect in a secure manner to your business systems and data. So that's the advice that we wanted to offer you at the end of this crash course. And at the very end, I'd like to just remind you that we have those additional crash courses and deep dives coming up. So Niklas already mentioned the crash course on AI-ready data platforms. If you're interested in that, stay tuned. Then we have a deep dive coming up on the Colab.ai method. So if you want to learn how we are doing AI-accelerated teamwork, then this is the deep dive for you. And also, if you got interested in the role of an AI designer, then we got a special deep dive on AI business design coming up in March. So stay tuned for that as well. I think that's all the content we had reserved for this crash course.
Already?
Yes. We could have spoken it a bit longer as well,
yes.
But let's try to keep it manageable for now. Yes. A lot to digest.
Yes.
So I think we have some time for a quick Q&A. So Niklas, do we have any questions online?
Yeah, and please continue to submit your questions online, and we try to address as many as we can. Yeah, I think one good starting question here could be this one. How do you measure the value and benefits of the Colab.ai model?
Yeah, I think those numbers there probably caught everybody's attention. They were quite impressive, but they were based on real-life measurements, for instance, from the ISS collaboration that we did. So, for instance, for iteration speed, we observed that when we previously used to take days to make a new design prototype or artifact, we could actually now create one in 5 minutes, and the team ended up creating 40 prototypes within one Colab.ai session. So that's one metric for how quickly you can iterate with this kind of AI accelerated transformation. Also, we had a metric, for instance, reducing the speed of decision making. And that's where the power really is, because in the traditional development model, you cannot afford to have the whole team, all the stakeholders and decision makers sitting around the same table. It's not efficient. In the traditional model, you need the product owner or the business owner to give a brief to the team. The team goes away, they build something, and at the end of the sprint, they come back, they present to the product owner what they achieved, and then they receive feedback. But AI acceleration actually makes it possible for the team to do that live in the same meeting without anybody leaving the room. And what we are seeing is that the decision-making speed accelerates from getting feedback from the product owner once per sprint, maybe in once a week or once per 2 weeks, to actually the business decision maker making decisions, providing guidance to the developer every 5 minutes or so during the Colab.ai sessions. So all the numbers we presented there were based on actual observed facts from our use cases.
Maybe I could complement from the business perspective that, of course, these are quite early phases still, but the expectation is that the time to market will be shorter. So investment needing to get the new solution to the market will be smaller. So due to the iteration speed and the decision speed. And then, of course, when we are able to iterate the solution in a quicker term, then the solution evolution based on the market performance, what we actually have out there is then also quicker, so we can adapt to the market changes or customer needs quicker, and thus increase the revenues on that we get from the solution. All the savings if it's like internal. So from the business perspective, the value is measured from the needed investments for time go to market, and then also the market performance and the actual profit coming out of it, whether it's cost savings or new revenue. I think those are also
the outcomes.
Yeah. But of course, in practical terms, these are still early phases and to be proven. But I think from the business perspective, these are the figures how to measure the value also.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that it depends to some extent on the type of business problem that you're trying to solve. We are maybe seeing the biggest value creation and the most dramatic acceleration in software development, in prototyping and concept development. But we've applied Colab.ai successfully to many different kinds of business problems. And sometimes the value increase is bigger, sometimes the value increase is smaller, but it's always there. We haven't had a single case yet where we would have felt afterwards, or the client would have felt afterwards, that this wasn't actually worth the file, that this didn't actually improve.
Yes.
Every time we've done it, the client has found that it was a really good way to spend their money.
Good question. We are getting ourselves excited.
Yeah. Maybe we'll take another one as well and not get stuck.
Let's move to the next one. I think this is a really good one as well. What about the overall AI governance model? How to implement, manage, and develop AI solutions together with the business function processes and IT and third-party service providers, so that we have a clear role and responsibilities between different stakeholders and an efficient way of working.
€1 million question.
AI governance is a hairy topic, and the kind of first way to tackle is to unpack that. What do you actually mean by AI governance? And then it starts to get easier to get a grip of it and start solving it. So AI governance, for instance, means that you have that kind of structured value delivery pipeline where you have clearly defined what are the deliverables and the exit criteria for each stage, who's making decisions and where, how do you track the portfolio of your AI initiatives, how do you bring different kinds of AI initiatives into the same portfolio, whether it be custom ML development or external partner tools or rolling out productivity tools like Copilot or whatever. But then AI governance, of course, means also compliance and risk management, and that means that you need to have this gradual reduction of uncertainty. So you cannot conduct a full AI risk assessment at the level of every individual idea. That would just kill idea generation instantly. So you need to start by asking a few important questions in the very beginning and then increasing the level of detail as you go further along the pipeline to make sure that before you invest in a production project, you're actually confident that the solution that you're building is sustainable, responsible, and compliant.
And adds to that, Mikko? No, I think Tero covered that already quite nicely. Maybe just on the portfolio level and the organization level, we've been quite a lot discussing about the combining into the same portfolio the enabler side of things and then the use case driven side of things. And in too many cases, those happen in isolation or siloed in separately. So the platform vision starts to drift to different direction than the actual use cases what are needing, and this kind of reusable building blocks will not materialize. It's just a subset of the governance that you were outlining a bit, but I think just like taking a snapshot view from that ensure that part is covered when you start to create this, because then you are able to steer the creation of the governance in total in a value-based way.
Good answer. Okay, let's look into a third question here. I think this is also a good one. AI platforms are developing very fast now. As humans seem to be the bottleneck here, how to enable and support the human plus AI collaboration other than productivity fields like new solution innovations, etc.?
What was the final question part? How to
enable and support the human plus AI collaboration other than productivity fields?
So not just rolling out productivity tools.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty good question. With you, Mikko.
I'd say that to get this happening, focus on the forerunners and for a while forget the late maturity or even early maturity, because then there you need to do the change management, there you need to do the communication and whatnot. All companies already have those curious individuals which might be in not obvious places in the organization. So find that end of extreme and then put the pedal to the metal for that group of people and remove the barriers. So in that way, the AI and human and AI collaboration will start to materialize in your company. You start to see actual stories about failures and successes within the company in your own context, your own people, and then fuel that flame. And then 12, 18 months forward, you can start to consider a bit that how do you start to activate the early maturity in the company. Maybe that one, like not the silver bullet, but an option.
Yeah, I think that connects nicely to what we spoke about AI maturity assessment previously as well, and how you can use that to understand what are the attitudes toward toward AI in your organization. So who are concerned about it and feel like they've been left out, and who are eager and excited to work smarter with the help of AI. And I think what you mentioned about focusing on the early adopters is really a key to turning that concern and that doubt into excitement when you see how your colleagues are actually working smarter. They are not being replaced by AI, they are actually becoming more productive, becoming more powerful, becoming more excited by using AI tools. So that's a really important transition in attitudes that you can achieve by getting the early adopters to share their learnings with the organization.
Yes, Yeah, maybe one thing to add, that from the leadership perspective, I think that this is really hard topic for leaders to lead and empower the people, because they are also in the blind in a bit. So how do you lead with a topic that you are also like unaware of yet? But I think that encouraging people and pushing them to repeatedly ask, what if? Could I already do this with the technology? We started with the graph that the technology can do way more where we even know what it can do. And on an individual level, I'm constantly like seeing the same solution in new eyes, this kind of Vuja Day phenomenon that, oh, actually, how was this possible? That it was possible that I didn't just had discovered it, that it's able to do. So as a leader, pushing your own employees and your own teams to do that kind of relentless discovery and asking yourself that, could I actually do this, and do that in a constant feedback loop.
Maybe just to wrap up our answer to that question on a positive note, I got a bit of good news on that. So a few years back, we helped a leading construction company formulate their AI strategy. And as part of that, we did an AI maturity assessment in their organization. And the assumption maybe was that a construction company is not going to be very high maturity in AI. But what we found actually in the assessment was that people across the company were very excited about AI and very eager to adopt these tools into practice. And there was nobody in the company who was afraid that AI is going to replace them. Of course, construction might be a good industry for that. But nonetheless, it turned out that the attitudes were actually a lot more positive and eager than people anticipated.
Perfect, yeah.
Okay, I think this is also a good question. It was a follow-up question on the Colab.ai measurement, but it's not related to Colab.ai. What is your general advice on what to measure in the whole AI transformation journey you just explained? And how do you know that you're on the right track?
Well, that's quite
another $1 million.
Quite a lot. Yeah. Shall we do a separate crash course on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, you need measurement on multiple levels. So if I just quickly start, and you guys can chip in then. But Mikko spoke a lot about the value and focusing on value. So of course, you do need to measure the value of the AI solutions, of the use cases that you are building. So it starts with very kind of vague and rough estimations that become more and more refined and more confident as you move forward in the funnel. So that's one key area to measure and lead. What is the actual value that you are delivering? And that comes from the use cases that you are building. But I also spoke about showing the size of the price. So using the kind of business level value potential estimations to justify the need for AI transformation. And then, of course, you cannot look at the individual use cases because you don't know exactly what those use cases are going to be yet. So then you need to just find reference points from other companies that are further along the way already and show that what kind of impact they have achieved on a high level, to just show that this is something that can be really relevant to and valuable to you as well. But that's the kind of value delivery. Then, of course, you need to measure the process, the pipeline as well. So you need to track the different steps of the pipeline. For instance, how much time are you spending in each step? Are things moving along as they are expected? What is your conversion from the previous step to the next step? And so on. So you can have a lot of these kind of process metrics for the value pipeline as well. Can you think of some other key areas to measure in the AI transformation?
If we take a helicopter view on the topic, I think that, and again, simplifying this a bit. So first, knowing what to do and are you on the right course, starting from what you are, who are you as a company? What are you doing? So having that as a clear in mind sets you the direction. If you are selling apples, you don't farm chickens. Start to farm chickens with AI, like as a example. So that sets you the course. And then as that's clear, what is today's business model that you're operating in, then okay, what are the key processes that has the major impact on whether you are profitable or not? So finding places in there that what to evolve, where to embed AI, then helps you. And those are like already measured today. And then the final one is in the winning value proposition in the competitive environment. So are you winning your competitors? Are you keeping and gaining customers? And then how to introduce AI in the customer-facing solutions. That's also like measurements are in place and the direction is set there. So keep the eye on the ball on that level and then start to like break it down to a more concrete level, whether you are on the like under the hood technicalities or actually a product owner or product category owner on the business side.
Indeed. And
a bit high level, but
and one final perspective to measure is then the change in the attitudes and the experienced competence in the organization. I'm pointing back to the maturity assessment, which we already mentioned previously, but that's one way to also understand how the maturity in your organization is increasing, how people are feeling. Do they feel that they have become more productive and more confident with AI than before? So multiple different perspectives.
True. Adoption metrics are like in the early steps now for upskilling and tool adoption. They are like key to
and really
get started.
Really important to measure tool retention because
I think we are.
Niklas is signaling that we're out of time.
It's really good to see you're all so excited about it. Obviously, we could spend a lot of more time digging deeper into the questions, but we are running out of time. So thank you so much for joining this session this morning, and thank you also, Mikko and Tero. It was a pleasure doing this with you. So we're already looking forward to the next crash course.
Thank you.